One of the most important aspects of providing valuable training is the use of effective communication. Have you ever attended a class where the purpose of the class was not properly spelled out or the material was presented in a way that was confusing? If so, you have experienced ineffective communication. The ability to communicate effectively is essential in training. Communicating is more than speaking. It involves your entire presence. How you present yourself has a great deal of impact on your participants' interest and desire to learn. As an instructor, you must be able to communicate your knowledge, skills, and experiences to participants in order to facilitate the learning process. How you communicate often has more impact than the content of your message. The skills and techniques explained in this session will assist you in strengthening your ability to communicate effectively. Over the course of 2 training videos, we will describe how to develop effective communication, discuss the communication process, explain the barriers to effective communication, show how to interpret nonverbal cues, explain how to create a learning culture, and define how to question for effective learning. The purpose of effective communication in a training environment is to ensure students accurately understand the material presented by the instructor. There are basically 2 principles you need to understand that have to do with communicating effectively: the identification and removal of barriers to communication, and the communication process itself. Remember that the audience is more important than the topic you are training on. The information presented should be honest and accurate. Tell it to them straight. It should engage them to want to learn, and the material should provide them all the tools necessary for the learning activity they will be completing. There are many skills and techniques you must master to be an effective communicator and instructor. Many of these skills you already possess. All that is required now is that you use them to their best advantage. Others you may need to learn and/or practice. Listening is one of our most important communication skills. It is an active process of hearing and understanding that demands concentration and attention. Both you and your students have responsibilities in the communication process. You must ensure that the learning environment is free of distractions that might interfere with the student's ability to listen. Be alert to the nonverbal behaviors of your participants. Facial expressions reveal much of what is happening in the mind of a student. A quizzical look indicates some misunderstanding has occurred or a question needs to be addressed. A student leaning slightly forward and maintaining good eye contact with you is probably interested and sincere about learning. An affirmative head nod indicates approval, agreement, or understanding. Conversely, eye contact out of the window or someplace other than the front of the room may indicate boredom or lack of interest. Fidgeting in the chair or a slouched posture may also be an indication of something other than effective listening. Raised hands and relevant questions are sure signs that you are communicating effectively. Learn to determine if students are listening by the type of feedback they provide. Remember, effective listening depends on motivation, and you are the prime motivator in your classroom. Students should arrive for instruction ready to learn. They should participate and ask questions as they arise. Students must understand that they have responsibility for their own learning. This requires active listening on their part. One way to help students understand their learning responsibilities is for you to make them clear at the outset of the lesson, and periodically remind them of your expectations throughout the learning session. Communication is the exchange of thought, opinions, and information through speech, writing, nonverbal cues, signs, and images. The communication process consists of a sender, a message, a delivery vehicle, and a receiver. There are 4 elements involved in sending a message. First, as the instructor, the sender, you formulate the message you intend to communicate in your mind or in a lesson plan. Next, you consider possible barriers that may affect your message. These barriers may include your own experience, your student's experience, the terms you will use, and even your feeling towards the subject or that of the students. External barriers and environmental factors such as noise must also be considered. Third, you encode the message, that is, you put the message into the words you want to use. Lastly, you clearly communicate or transmit the message. The message is whatever information you want to convey. The message may be verbal or nonverbal. The delivery vehicle is the method you choose to deliver the message. Delivery vehicles include spoken or written words, pictures, or other visual aids, or computer-based lessons and modules. In order to accommodate the different styles of learning, it is generally a good idea to convey the same message through several delivery vehicles. For example, you may write an important term on the board and then pronounce it to the students, addressing both the auditory and the visual learners with the same message through two different delivery vehicles. There are also 4 elements involved in receiving a message. The students, receivers, will first hear and/or see the message you sent. Second, the message is affected by external barriers, if any, and the student's own internal barriers. Possible internal barriers may include the student's experience level, their understanding of the terms used, their attitude towards the material, or the way they feel about you. Third, your students decode the message using mental images and thoughts. For example, when you say the word circus, the receiver may not see the letters that form the word. Instead, a mental image of some sort may appear, or thoughts may begin to formulate. How many different mental images or thoughts might arise among your students based on this one word alone? Images or thoughts of a clown, a big top, lions, acrobats, and so forth may be recalled. Finally, the students interpret the message. Clearly, at this point in the process, there is no way for you to determine that all of the students received the message you intended. To determine this, you must get feedback. Feedback, which may take several forms, provides essential information about your success in communicating the message. To get feedback, have the students respond to oral questions and encourage them to ask questions. The students' nonverbal behaviors also provide important clues as to their understanding of the material. Facial expressions and body movements often indicate when students are unsure about the meaning of your message. You should be careful in accepting a yes response when you ask, "Do you understand?" Obtain meaningful feedback by asking questions that require the student to provide answers, which indicate that they do in fact understand exactly what you intended. For example, they should paraphrase. This is crucial. The message should be structured into 3 buckets: planning, preparing, and presenting. Preparing the message. Interpret the content of the message to align with the needs of your audience. Present the message. Think of how you will speak to the content of the material. Coordinate your body language to the message you are delivering. Consider the visual aids you will utilize to support the message. Plan what you are going to say. Know your audience and their needs. Know the message you are delivering and be prepared to answer questions on the message. Know the best way to deliver the message. What you say and how you say it requires attention. Use short, simple phrases and avoid jargon and acronyms. Make the content fit the needs of your audience. The existence of certain barriers increases the potential for poor communication. By being aware of these barriers, you can reduce them and enhance the clear understanding of your students. Let's discuss some of the common barriers to effective communication. These include lack of common core experience, overuse of abstractions, fear, and environmental factors. Let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. One barrier is a lack of common core experience. You are unlikely to find any group in which students have the same common core experiences. For example, if you say that a kiwi tastes like a kumquat, students who have tasted one would have the experience to make the proper association. However, for the students who have tasted neither, the comparison will have no meaning. To prevent the problem, determine student experience level before you prepare your lesson. Then check for understanding as you use examples and analogies with your explanations. Abstractions are concepts, ideas, or terms that are indirectly related to the subject being discussed. To avoid confusion, you should speak in concrete terms and be specific. Be aware of the background and experience level of your students and use appropriate terms and examples. You will normally have more experience in the subject matter than any of your students, so you have the responsibility of ensuring their understanding. This requires that you not only present the information clearly, but also that you check to ensure training participants understand exactly what you intended. Fear may be one of the greatest barriers to effective communication. The fear of showing ignorance, fear of disapproval, fear of losing status, and fear of judgment are all common barriers to communication. Many times, participants will have anxieties or fears about their abilities. Students may hesitate to take part in your discussion because they have a lack of confidence and are afraid they will appear ignorant. That in turn brings about a fear of judgment and a fear of losing status in front of their peers. Try to understand your students' fears. Provide a threat-free learning environment by being encouraging and non-judgmental of your participants. Remember how long it took you to learn your subject matter and gain your expertise. Your students may not have the same natural ability for or interest in the subject area that you do. Take the time to recognize individual differences in your students so that you will know how to motivate them. Since you have control of the class, you must direct the class energy in a positive direction. Do not allow fellow students to make fun or exhibit disapproval of a struggling participant. Avoid embarrassing any of your students or offending human values. Follow the basic principle of motivation by giving them positive feedback. Environmental factors such as noise and temperature may interfere with the communication process. Obviously, noise is a barrier to hearing what is being said. If students are overly hot or cold, it may be difficult for them to listen attentively. However, more subtle factors may also affect the communication process. Poor lighting, the color of the walls, uncomfortable seats, the location of pictures or illustrations, and the arrangement of students in relation to the instructor may all become barriers to effective communication. You should constantly strive to identify and eliminate barriers to effective communication. Some will be obvious while others may be very difficult to detect. For this reason, it is a good practice to ask students regularly if they can hear you or see what you are demonstrating right before you do it. After students see you are responsive to their environmental needs, they are more willing to bring them to your attention, even when you do not remember to ask. Your awareness of barriers, along with knowledge of the communication process and sensitivity to students' needs, will assist you in communicating effectively in your classroom. The difference between what people say and how we understand what they are saying comes from the nonverbal communication they are using, also called body language. A trainer can determine how an audience is responding to material more from body language than from what the participant is actually saying. Utilize and pay attention to eye contact, body language, and gestures while facilitating your training session. Let's look at these each in a little bit more detail. The most powerful and influential element of instructor presence in front of a class is direct eye contact with your audience. By looking directly in the eyes of each of your students, you personalize the lesson being presented and stimulate the desire for them to listen more intently. Each student should have your direct eye contact several times during the instructional period. Make and maintain this eye contact for 3 to 5 seconds. This time interval is appropriate for personal contact without being overbearing or creating some level of discomfort for individual students. Scan the entire class without developing a mechanical pattern. Avoid the common pitfall of talking to the chalkboard or visual aid panel or any other training aid you may be using. Maintaining effective eye contact enhances your credibility. Another important reason for looking directly at your students is to observe their nonverbal reactions to your instruction. Feedback provides you with the opportunity to judge your effectiveness and make necessary adjustments. Students are more likely to participate actively in their own learning when they know you are as aware of them as they are of you. Body movement is an important part of successful communication. It reinforces, emphasizes, and clarifies verbally expressed ideas. However, your actions while instructing must reinforce rather than contradict your words. Make sure the images you present and your body movements strengthen your communication. Movement is the motion of the whole body as you travel about the classroom. Movement attracts the attention of the listener because the eye instinctively follows moving objects and focuses on them. Movement can help you convey thoughts to your audience. The basic rule in movement is moderation. Do not remain glued to one spot, but do not keep on the move all the time. As your skills and experience increases, your movement will become less obvious and more meaningful. Learn to modify the degree of movement to make it natural and meaningful. Plan your movement so that you are at the proper place at the proper time. For example, when using computer-aided instruction, plan movements so that you are at the computer or smartboard when it is time to discuss the next teaching point. A gesture is a natural movement of any part of the body that conveys a thought or emotion or reinforces oral expression. Your arms, hands, and facial expressions are your principal tools of gesture. Your gestures will depend to a large extent on whether your personality is vigorous and dynamic or calm and easygoing. Regardless of your personality, gestures will add to the effectiveness of your speech if you relax your shoulders, arms, and hands and concentrate on communicating to the audience the meaning and importance of your ideas. When the gesture is natural, it is effective. These natural gestures, when accomplished properly, add confidence to your instruction. If the gesture is artificial, posed, or strained, it detracts rather than reinforces. Practice gestures as a natural part of your speaking manner. They should arise spontaneously from enthusiasm and conviction. Descriptive gestures portray an object or illustrate an action. Describe the size, shape, or movement of an object by imitation. Show a vigorous punch by striking with your fist. Show height by holding your hand at the desired level. Show speed by a quick sweep of your arm. Pantomime a complicated or humorous movement as you describe it. As trainers, we also present more through body language than through our mere words. So we should do the following. Present a positive first impression and convey confidence. Keep an eye out for defensiveness from our audience. Signs of this include crossed arms, showing little facial expression, if a student's body physically turns away from you, or if they can't maintain eye contact with you. Lack of engagement is shown through a learner's head being down, or they gaze at something else, or they're not paying attention, or their attention is elsewhere. In the first part of Session 5 on developing effective communication, we described how to develop effective communication, discussed the communication process, examined the barriers to effective communication, and showed how to interpret nonverbal cues. In the second part of developing effective communication, we will explore how to create a learning culture and define how to question for effective learning.